You are absolutely going to fail in life unless you do these two things. And I know that that's a bold statement to be making right now, but it is absolutely true. And I was just recently watching a video by Alex Hormozi, and I was like, yeah, he's got this one figured out too. So let's just dive right in and talk about why it is you will fail unless you do these two things. The first thing that you need to do is take responsibility for your actions. And I know that this can seem kind of ambiguous, where you're like, well, I don't really know what that means. But it pretty much applies across the board in every avenue of life. So it can be really challenging to figure out what exactly you need to take responsibility for. But as a general rule, I would say take responsibility for everything in your life. And I know that a lot of people are going to be offended by that statement because we have this notion in our head that other people have done things to us. And they have, definitively. We all have had people do things to us that we didn't necessarily deserve. I've been bullied for my weight. I've been bullied for my intellect. I've been told that I'm too young to have the opinions that I have. So I've been a victim of ageism. I've been a victim of sexism. I've been a victim of bullying, fat phobia, I don't know, whatever. But the reality is, all of those things that I could use as excuses don't prevent me from actually getting to where I want to go unless I allow them to take control of my life. So something that Alex Hormozi said that I thought was just a brilliant depiction of how this works is, let's assume for a second that you are 100% right, that whatever's happened in your life prevents you from getting the life that you want to. Now what are you going to do? If you think about it long enough, you're going to realize, I don't want to live that life. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to allow my past to limit me. And I am of the mentality that you can choose to be whoever you want to be. You don't have to give in to this idea of I am who I am, and I can't change, because literally every second of every day, you are changing. You're changing biologically. You're changing your mind. You're changing your age. You're growing. You're becoming something more. And unless you take control of that growth, you're actually going to notice that you tend to trend downward. You tend toward decay rather than growth. And I'm definitely of the mind that if you aren't growing, you're dying. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to die, like physically tomorrow, but you could die mentally, you could die emotionally, you could die spiritually. And unless you actually start actively pursuing growth, you're going to find that you decay over time. This is why people, when they age, they get cynical, because life just doesn't seem as rosy. They've lost the hope they once had. And we really need that hope. We need to know that life can be great. And we need to know that we have the power to make it that way, that we don't have to wait for somebody else to give us that opportunity. So here I am telling you right now, you do have the power, and I'm sorry for whatever has happened to you. Life really does suck sometimes. I remember the first death I ever experienced. It was somebody I was extremely close to. She was an exchange student that we actually had from Germany, and I was 7 at the time, and I really, really loved her. But then she went back home to Germany and pretty much immediately died of a brain tumor. And I remember my parents telling me this and feeling so betrayed by them telling me, feeling like they'd kept it from me, feeling like they were hiding something. And the reality is, there was nothing to be done. There was nothing that could have changed that situation. Nobody even knew she had a tumor. So there wasn't a way to change it. And at the time, I fell into such a severe depression that my mom actually decided, we need to take Allie to therapy. We need to get her working through this, because when you're 7, there's not really an option of suicide. As you get older, if you get a loss like that, you start thinking those more negative thoughts. But when you're 7, it's kind of like, well, do I want to live the rest of my life like this? Or do I want to get past it? And I had to learn how to get past it. And in many ways, I think that's been tremendously helpful in my growth, because it taught me who I wanted to be. It taught me that life is fleeting, that we really need to value our relationships, that we really need to value each other and the contributions that we can make to the world. We can't be wasting our time doing things that don't really matter. This is one of the reasons why I have such a hard time working a 9-to-5 job, because I feel like I'm wasting my talent. And while I don't necessarily have the following I need in order to create YouTube as a income right now, I still feel like I'm contributing to the world by making these videos, because I'm sharing the hopefulness and the dream that we can have a better world and that we can have a better life. And from my perspective, that's a much better use of my time than driving around in a semi-truck delivering goods. And I know that people are like, well, semi-trucks do a valuable job, and they absolutely do. I just feel that I'm made for more. And I think most of us are. And those jobs can be divided up better to where we don't need somebody doing them 70 hours a week, which is how much I did them when I was doing semi-truck driving. So we don't need, especially now, we don't need people working 40-hour work weeks just to scrape by. That's not a requirement. We don't need that. But in order to create this new society, we have to recognize our power. We have to know how much we're truly capable of, or at least that we're capable of more than we've currently been doing. We have to know that we can play a part in creating the better world and the better future that we're hoping for. And that's one of the reasons why I created this YouTube channel. So I'm like, I need people to know that I need them, that we need them, and that a better life is possible. So you can't just be living your life blaming everybody else for what's going on, even if it is their fault. I absolutely agree. There are things that happen that are totally the other person's fault. And I see no issue with you hating them for it, other than hate generally destroys your life. So there's that aspect. But if you want to be the best version of yourself, you have to ask yourself at some point, do I want my life to be dictated by this past event? Do I want everything I do in life to revolve around what happened in the past? And if you're willing to let go of that pain, you become much more capable, and you actually become much stronger than you could have been without that event, because you now have a testimony of how you moved from such darkness to such hopefulness and light. And we all love those stories. We all need to hear things like that. We need to know how capable we are and how good life can be after darkness. So I highly recommend that anybody strive to take more responsibility in their life for everything. Because if you aren't the one capable of changing it, who has the power? Probably going to be the other person. So if you decide, I want the power, I want to be the one changing things, I want to take responsibility, now you have the ability to actually make the changes required. So that's why responsibility is so important. And I know that it can be a harsh thing to hear, but it has been tremendously life-changing for me to realize that I don't need to live with the pain of the past. I don't need to struggle with all of those things that people have done to me and utilize them as reasons for me not growing. Just being able to say, I'm not willing to grow right now, is a very powerful statement. And I know it doesn't necessarily seem like it, but knowing that you're making a choice consciously is just such an amazing experience. And knowing that every time you have something come up, you have the ability to make that same choice. And you can say, I am not prepared to do it. And one of the best lines that I ever heard that kind of exemplifies this idea is Phoebe from Friends, where Ross is moving into his new apartment and he asks for people to help. And Phoebe says, oh, well, I would, but I don't want to. Nobody can argue with her there because she's being perfectly honest. She's made her decision and she's not going to help, and that's okay. I know people are going to call her selfish, but she helps people in so many other ways. So she's allowed to make that choice, and you're allowed to make that choice. You're allowed to be the person that you want to be. You're allowed to do things that you want to do, but you can't let the past limit you in the way that you have been. Which leads us to the next stage of moving past failure towards success, which is you have to find something that you can do every day to move you towards your goal. And I know that for me, this was a very, very hard lesson to learn, because I always thought, given how easy school was, that I was a gifted individual. And that meant that if I was struggling, I shouldn't be doing it. And it took a long time for me to figure out that if I want to have a better life, I can't allow this notion of being a gifted person hold me back. I can't allow this notion of needing to be great at everything prevent me from actually learning and growing and becoming something more. Adulthood is all about becoming more than you are, and that is hard work no matter what. So if you're gifted, that just means you've got a leg up. And now you have to learn how to be consistent. You have to learn how to keep taking steps in the direction of the things that you want, because you can either have your dream life or you can not fail. The two cannot go together. If you want that dream life, you have to be open to failure. And if you aren't willing to fail, you have to be comfortable with a less comfortable life. There's not really another option than that. And I know my husband talks all the time about how he wants to have everything. You know, he wants it to be easy and he wants the results. And I'm like, everything's a sacrifice. You have to be willing to make that sacrifice. You have to be willing to fall on your face if you want to get the result. Being a mom is freaking hard, you know? But if I want to have nice, well-adjusted children, I have to be willing to invest my time into building them up. And I have to know that there is no true ultimate path. There is no perfect child. It's just a constant effort to help them grow and become something more. And I have to be the person who is demonstrating that in my life. I have to show that I'm growing and becoming better and striving towards something. So figuring out what steps you need to take and then doing those things every single day is going to be immensely beneficial in moving you towards your goals, because you're never going to get there if you're not moving. If you're trying to drive from California to New York and you get halfway there and then go, well, I'm never going to get to New York at this point, and then turn around, you're absolutely right. You're never going to get to New York, because New York requires you to keep going until you get there. And you're not going to see the end coming. You're not going to see New York on the horizon for a good long while until you're really freaking close to that end goal. Another example of this is popcorn. You know, you put popcorn in the microwave and you start the cooking process. And you'll notice that for 2/3 of the cooking process, you don't see any changes. But in that last 30 seconds to a minute, everything starts to shift and the popcorn starts to pop, and you just hear pop, 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 pop. Everything starts to take off, and all of a sudden you have the result that you're looking for, but you didn't see it coming up until it happened. And that's how success in pretty much anything works. That's how success on YouTube is going to work. That's how success in business is going to work. And that's how success in relationships works as well. You know, you don't know you're going to meet the right guy until you do. You don't know you're going to get married until you do. And everything's like that. You don't see the baby until you go into labor and give birth. Now, granted, you may see some progress. You may see the belly growing bigger. But to some extent, it's hard to believe that thing will be a child until they're out of the womb in your arms. So life is a process of birthing new, whether that's actual literal children or ideas. But by taking responsibility, making the decision, and then moving towards your goals consistently, that's what your life is going to be. It's a constant process of becoming something bigger, something better, something greater. And then you'll be able to look back at your life and say, wow, I really did something worthwhile. This was a meaningful life.